Hurricanes tied. Live post-game show after game 4. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Logan Mullen. Logan, I'm happy to have you on one of these. Maybe you're good luck. Maybe that's what it is. You come
I
in
could,
automatically, great luck.
yeah, it could be. It's been a minute since we've talked, and
It
so
has.
that this is a change of pace.
You're injecting the luck back in, but what a game this was. I mean, it's funny, you look at where this series was 2 games ago after games 1 and 2, hard to see this happen, and now the series is tied, which is kind of wild in the sense because as I said, the first 2 games were so poor.
Yes,
And one of the biggest changes made prior to game 3 was the top line being put back together. Bergeron, Marchand on the left, Pastrnak on the right. It clicks. It clicked in game 3. It really clicked in game 4. I mean, that set face-off play, Logan. Like, whew.
that's
Whew.
there are going to be a lot of youth coaches showing that to kids for
Yes, they're gonna be drawing it up like you're gonna be Pastrnak. No, I want to be Pastrnak. No, you're gonna be Marchand. I want to be Bergeron. But it's funny. It's past even that set play, and I think this was something that was said a lot going into the series. Is the Hurricanes don't have a similar line. They're very deep, but they don't have a star-studded line that can really shut down Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak. Do you see this kind of carrying them through the rest of the series potentially?
it might have to because I think that Carolina is a more complete team. Like I feel like there are fewer holes on the Hurricanes,
Yes.
but the top end talent everywhere leans in favor of the Bruins. It's sort of the back half. So I think that their success the rest of the way, as we've seen the way the last 2 games have gone, is probably going to be predicated on that top line figuring it out. I mean, if you isolate them each individually, Brad Marchand in particular, like we've seen today and on what was it, Friday, how much different of a team the Bruins look like when Brad Marchand's clicking. And, you know, I understand the concern with maybe leaning too much on them. We've seen that go sideways plenty of times, but for right now, if it's what gets you through, like it doesn't really matter. It's just talking points at a certain point.
If you win this series, who cares? Like you can go
Yeah.
back to for the next series, you can go back to the depth aspect and put Pastrnak back on the second line. Because as we've both said, the second line of Hall, Holla has really not been a big factor in this series. Holla, and if you want to put Smith on the right side or whomever, or DeBrusque, it's not terrific. That line does not excite people the way that I think they'd like to be excited. But if you're going to be carried by your top line, so be it. Like if it wins you the series, who cares?
Right.
And so I think that's one of the big things with this top line and it's funny because they did this against Carolina the last 2 times they played in the
Yeah.
playoffs. This Bergeron line always owns the Canes. It always kind of came down to Bergeron owning that Aho matchup. This time they're just kind of doing everything right as a trio in these 2 games. And, you look past that and past the first round, you go, okay, well, what else worked in the Bruins' favor? I think the number one thing that worked in the Bruins' favor in game 4, the Hurricanes combusted. Oh
Yeah.
my God, Logan. I mean, no, they blew up. And it really
Well,
started with Tony D.
yeah,
Classic Tony
it always
DeAngelo
does.
doing stupid stuff.
Yeah. Well, so I think that like it's easy to sit here and laugh at Tony DeAngelo being a chucklehead because we all know
Yeah.
the history there, but does anybody, even on the Hurricanes, does anybody trust him to regroup after this? Like the
No.
way he was behaving, for the lack of a better term, like throwing his stick at the end of the game, he was clearly, I mean, Curtis Lazar is basically laughing at him, just goading him into trying to get a taunting penalty. I have no reason to believe that he's going to be able to set that aside for the rest of the series. And for all of his faults as a human and as a player, like Tony DeAngelo is still very skilled. So if you've
Oh,
taken him
yeah.
out of this game because you completely rattled him, then that's going to be a very important byproduct the rest of the way. And, you talk about previous Hurricane series. Everybody knew it was over when, what was it, 19, when Justin Williams started committing stupid penalties. Like everything
Dougie
unraveled
Hamilton.
for the Hurricanes once the Bruins get in their head. And this game,
Dougie was another. Dougie was another.
he was another. So you've seen it enough now with the way that the Bruins play the Hurricanes that half the battle for them seems to be luring the Hurricanes into doing stupid stuff. And today they did that. And now Rod Brindamore has to spend the next 48 hours trying to figure out how to tell Tony DeAngelo, stop doing dumb shit and figure out how to dial it back in. Because if he's unglued the rest of the way, the Hurricanes are host.
He's on their top pairing. He run like
Yeah,
he's on their power play. I do think though, I do think he can be reeled in for game 5 solely because it's in Carolina. He's not getting booed every time he touches the puck.
yeah,
The fans are technically on his side. So I think game 5 he might be fine. He might not. I mean, he's Tony DeAngelo. Like this is not like a regular player. This is someone who's a very interesting special case. And again, a lot of people on Twitter who even said they weren't great lip readers were saying they thought Martian was calling him a racist, which clearly got under his skin. Like
yeah,
that stuff clearly worked. As you said, he came unglued. By the way, kudos to Martian for the A+ chirps. That is,
yeah.
I just imagine Martian preparing for the series after he does his film, like looking up like dirt on every player. Probably didn't take long to find dirt on Tony D. But I do think that again, a game 5 for DeAngelo might be a little bit easier. It's more game 6. So that's why it makes this game 5 that much more important. Because if the Bruins can find a way to win that game 5, then you are the favorite, and they have
Yeah.
not been the favorite for much of this series, if at all. Because I know coming into this series, it was fairly close. And this kind of leads me to this point. It's a shame the Bruins don't have home ice. It's a shame because if you just again, granted, it's the first 2 games at home, 2 games away, 2 games at home. It would probably feel better for a lot of Bruins fans. It would feel good for the Bruins if they had the opportunity to have Game 7 at
Yeah.
home. And I think that's going to be an interesting case where suddenly, maybe you lose game 5 in Carolina, you win game 6, and this is the 2011 Cup final all over again. And you're
Right. Who
having to
breaks
win
the
on the road.
pattern?
Not easy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like if you're the Bruins, you've got to just figure out a way to win game 5 on the road. Like if I'm them, I don't like and there's a certain level of like, yeah, no kidding, but they don't want to go back come back to Boston needing to win game 6 and then needing to win again on the road. I don't know. Like, I don't want to overstate the impact of home ice. Like, clearly there was buzz in Boston that helped. I do think that genuinely had. I mean, Tony DeAngelo was in the penalty box barking at a fan. Like, clearly
Yeah.
the home ice part worked, but the Bruins just got the brakes beat off of them the first couple of games. So at a certain point, it's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to sit here and put that much on the road venue rather than the fact that the Bruins are just objectively bad. So I don't know. I struggle to read into that too much just because, it's the playoffs and the excuse making's kind of over. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a tough one because there's a real correlation causation thing going on there. Like, did the Bruins get walloped in Carolina because they couldn't handle the crowd? Like, I hesitate to believe that, but
Yeah, probably not.
it would be two-faced to me to be like, well, that's why they ran the Hurricanes out of the building the last 30 minutes today.
I do think, though, it hurts them in the sense of the line matchups. You don't get to
For
put
sure. Yeah.
Bergeron in the favorable matchups. You got to go have him go up against Stahl for an entire game. I think that aspect of it is the real kicker.
Most certainly.
It wasn't the kicker today for the Hurricanes. I think legitimately the Hurricanes did come unglued at times. I think for the Bruins, it's more those line matchups. Because again, like you look at when Bergeron goes up against like anybody other than the Stahl line in a lot of these cases, and suddenly it's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
The one thing we have not mentioned yet, we're like 9 minutes into this. You know what we have not mentioned? They did not have Charlie McAvoy today.
They
How
did
about
not,
that
yeah.
news? Coming out. So that's one of the tough things. I think people are kind of it maybe gets overlooked with this, but he's if I have this right, he got tested positive for COVID today.
Yeah, that's what
I
it
don't
sounds.
see how he comes back in for game 5. So that's an
Depends on
issue.
symptoms,
Yes, it does.
right? Yeah.
It does, but I'd have to imagine he must. This brings us all back to COVID things. I must imagine he would have had to have had symptoms to test
Right.
today.
Yeah.
So you hope they're gone by game 5.
Yeah. I mean, so I think the rule is that if they're symptomatic, you have to isolate for 5 days. Is it something like that? I
I
could be
saw. I
wrong.
saw. I thought I saw Fluto tweet that.
Yeah, and because I knew that it was, didn't they stop testing unless the guys were symptomatic? I mean, either way, there's a distinct possibility they might not be without Charlie McAvoy for Game 5. You can't rule out Game 6, but even I mean, look at today, right? that could have been an absolute backbreaker for them.
Oh
And
yeah.
you
Oh
know,
yeah.
you can't already down Hampus Lindholm, losing McAvoy, and I won't lie to you. I mean, uh, when they were down 2-1 in the second and 0 for 3 on the power play, um, and Carolina was giving them chances. They were begging them to take that game away from them. And to that point, the Bruins hadn't. I was thinking they were in a world of trouble because, the cards were stacked against them, losing their entire top pairing. Now you can't get the special teams to start clicking until later in the game. It looked a little bit bleak, but the fact that they trotted out Josh Brown and Mike Riley and Grizzlick's back with Carlo as a top pairing, that that was impressive resolve for the Bruins. That's going to go a very long way for them. That they've at least seen that they can survive with that group of guys. Now, if they lose anyone else, that could be a problem because I don't know who they have for black aces. It's going to be like a Sean or Tyler Lewington or someone like that since Providence is done. But I mean, they've bent and they were bending a lot today, but they didn't break. So that's what matters.
Imagine a right side with Josh Brown and Tyler Lewington as your second pairing right shot defenseman and your third. But that'd be, and if you win on that, you might as well just be handed the Stanley Cup at that point. Fluo Shinzawa tweeted before the game, per NHL rules, players who have tested positive must remain in isolation for at least 5 days since symptom onset. I would have to imagine that means no game 5. I don't know how, unless he just magically breaks the rules. I don't know how you do that. So
Yeah.
that's a tough loss. That is not easy. You hope he comes back for game 6. We'll see. I mean, again, these rules are so weird now because it's gone on for so long and they're always changing. But so that's an interesting thing to follow. And again, but the good news, I guess, is Hampus Lindholm has not officially been ruled out for Tuesday. He was skating before Sunday's game 4. I think that's an encouraging thing. I have a hard time imagining that he'll be back after seeing him have to get carried off the ice like that. But again, if you can get Lindholm back for game 5, even if you're down McAvoy, that's a huge upgrade.
Yeah. I mean, what's the number one thing they say is that if a guy's skating, that means he's close.
Yes.
Certainly within that close of a period of time. I mean, if it's Jakob Zaboral skating, he's not coming back. But
yes, that's different.
That's at a certain point. If you walk under enough ladders, you're going to get burned at a certain point. So, the Josh Brown thing, that all worked today as much as it could have. But and not that this is anyone's fault or that they have another choice, but you start pressing your luck a lot more when you end up, trotting out guys who are 7th, 8th, sometimes 9th defensemen in key roles playing 15 plus minutes, even if it's in a bottom pairing role. Now, I will say the one thing that might have saved the Bruins on that front a little bit is there were so many special teams today. So, I mean, there were guys playing huge minutes, and obviously McAvoy thrives on special teams and can run a power play, is obviously a great penalty killer, but the Bruins didn't have to go out there with Mike Riley and Josh Brown for 19, 20 minutes today. They didn't need to. So that could be a problem for the Bruins, is if Carolina ends up, keeping their heads in check a little bit better in game 5. And then suddenly it's there's no man advantage. So we've got to start playing some of these guys more.
They were able to use Josh Brown sparingly. They used him in situations that kind of fit him. Again, him and Riley had a tough, I think it was the first goal. They were a really bad net front it was the top of the second period. Weird net front communication, I believe. Right? Yep, 9 seconds in. That wasn't too great. But again, if you can just have that happen and you can bait the Hurricanes into doing other stuff. And you mentioned and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but Lazar not taking the bait on Tony D and Marchand not going back at D'Angelo in certain instances. I think the Bruins kind of have the right head on their shoulders, which we did not see in games 1 and 2 when there were slashes and stuff after the whistle. You also look at Bergeron getting clipped in the eye. I'm curious if who was it who clipped him in the eye? I was so focused on Bergeron that I totally missed who. It was Aho, because it was totally Sebastian Aho. I'm curious if they find him. And again, I feel weird about finding people for those high sticks, but if you're going to find Forbert, you have to imagine you'd find Aho for that. That was, again, I'm not just going off blood. That was a straight, right to the right to the eye.
Yeah. Well, the precedent's been set, right? Like the
Yeah,
forward thing, I thought that was just a stupid play on his part. Like it was just an ugly check.
yeah.
I didn't think he should have been fined for it necessarily, but the precedent's been set, right? So if you're going to fine him for that, you probably have to do the same thing for Aho, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah. No, I imagine you have to. And first, again, it kind of happened at the best possible moment because Bergeron got the whole intermission to kind of get his eye going, even though he wanted to get right back on the ice. He was
Yeah.
not. He was just gonna play bloody. Eye coming out of his out of his socket. Just I'm playing. I'm playing.
Well, and once you draw
Two,
blood, it's completely different, so
yes, yeah. You can't be out there just like playing with blood flowing out of your face.
yeah.
Let's two final things. Before we get to sort of what we think will happen the rest of the series, Jeremy Swayman, terrific in these past two games. I don't think he's had to. There've been some sequences where he's been under siege. I wouldn't say either of these games he stole. They did play a little bit better in front of him, but he did his job. Like, looks pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I feel kind of bad for Linus Olmark
I know,
because
right?
who knows? I Jeremy Swayman has obviously played well the last two games. I'm not sure if he's played so well that I'm sitting here thinking, well, he's doing things Olmark couldn't. But
Yeah,
either way,
no, it's not like
the
that.
thing for me is he hasn't given up any like kick to the pants goals. So
Yes,
they score. What was the 5-on-3 that they scored, and then in the second period, it was the second period, right, where they end
yeah,
up Carolina gets a power. There's 4-on-4, and then Carolina gets the power play the last second. It's like Jeremy Swayman's not giving up goals on nights, not giving up goals off of rushes, things like that. So when the Bruins finally started building momentum, like that was the biggest thing. When the Bruins started getting their act together late in the second period into the third period, you didn't see Swayman getting up and posting too many, bad opportunities, anything like that. Like he seemed fine. So that's basically all that you need in that situation, especially when you're leaning on the defense as much as you are in a group that's probably ill-equipped to be there at a certain point. But yeah,
yeah. He played well, and again, I am curious what they do about Game 5 because you wonder if they. I mean, Swayman's playing really well, but
well,
you wonder about during the season they didn't play that many games in a row ever. Really, do you fully lean on Swayman or do you give it back to Omar for Game 5? I think
no,
that's a
I
legitimate
think
question.
I
I
yeah,
do. I think they stick with Swayman, but I think it's a real decision.
yeah. I think you stick with Swayman. Even again, Olmark only carries a small bit of the fault for the way the first two games went. I think you just have a short leash. Like that's,
Yeah.
okay, Swayman gives up one ugly one, depends on how ugly it is, but then maybe you think about, changing course. But if you're the Bruins, like you're probably trying not to disrupt much at this point.
Yeah, I know. I just look at it from the perspective of like during they've not played many games in a row. You wonder if they kind of go back and forth. I don't know. Now again, I'm with you. I think Swayman should be the starter for Game 5. I don't think it'd be really stupid to kind of disrupt that. But I'd kind of see their point, right? Like going
Yeah.
back and forth, keeping guys fresh, trying to play the right guy. Now maybe that might be over managing. That might be completely over coaching, where you're like trying to pick the right guy. You're like Alex Cora in the lineup, just trying to
Yeah.
pick the right guy at the right time, which really isn't how you manage your goaltenders. But I think it's a decision. I think it's a decision. I don't know. Interesting
I
thing.
it just feels to me like too much of a media narrative. And it's like I understand why it's there because they set the precedent this year when they were switching off pretty much every game. And there weren't many extended stretches where you had one goalie that was going 3-4 plus games. But I don't know, like Swayman played in the NCAA and he played in the AHL briefly, where there are periods of time where you're used to playing like 3 days in a row. So
Yeah.
it's not like this is totally foreign to him, and it's not like it's been so long since he's had to do that. He's also young, so I'm not too worried about like stamina or recovery or anything like that. So for me,
And he's the chillest guy in net.
yeah, exactly. So, I just for me, it's like don't disrupt it, because what happens if you pull him and you say
Yes.
Olmark's got Game 5, where he's already had some rough moments in Carolina, and then Swayman's sitting there saying, "What did I do wrong?" And then,
Yes.
I'm not always a big believer in the, oh, you tank a guy's confidence kind of thing, but what kind of message is that sending where he plays a role in dragging them back to bringing the series level? And then you say, all right, thanks, Linus, who has as many games of playoff experience at this point as Jeremy Swayman does.
Yes.
And say, all right, Linus, job's yours. Like, I just don't see them taking that approach.
You're 100% right. I actually completely agree with that because you're right. If a guy comes in the lineup, scores 2 goals, they take him out, people go, "Why would you do that?" Like, that's really stupid. I 100% agree. I think there is a little decision there, but I do think Swayman should absolutely be the guy, and I think he will be the guy in Game 5. It'd be crazy to go away from that. Someone just commented Bruins Canucks vibes, which I kind of called before the game because I said this is the first time that this has ever like happened where since that 2011 Cup Bruins Canucks series. So this leads me perfectly into our final big question. Can they win this series? What was your prediction before the series, by the
Mine
way?
was
Because I don't think we.
Carolina at 6.
Oh, I had
So,
Carolina in 7.
yeah. I mean, they can win this series. They
Yes.
most certainly can win this series. I think what we've seen today is that is on the table. And game 3, it felt like they were clawing back into it. Game 4 had the feeling of like, no, like they actually can win this. Like, I don't know how sustainable the 5-goal pace was, and the Hurricanes,
Yeah.
crapping themselves in specific moments, but I think that you saw enough today where if you're a Bruins fan, you probably have the antennas up a little bit and think, well, maybe we can do this. So I don't know.
I am sticking with my Hurricanes in 7 prediction. I know people are not going to love that, but it's a series. Like it would not surprise anybody if the Bruins went on a run here and beat the Hurricanes, especially after what felt like a demoralizing loss for the Canes in game 4. I will say though, didn't game 2 feel just as demoralizing for the Bruins? Like
Sure.
it feels it again, that's what's tough to do with this where it's like it's 2-2. It is a very even series.
Yeah.
Two good games for the Hurricanes, two good games for the Bruins. It's hard to sit here and say that one team has the full advantage over the other. Bruins have the momentum by far.
Yeah.
But you're going back to Carolina now for game 5. So we'll see. We will
Yeah.
see. We'll do another post game show coming up after game 5. Lots of stuff to watch there. Hell of a game, though. Game 4.
Yeah.
Bruins fans, that is as fun and entertaining a game as you're going to get with that. So we'll see. We'll see what crazy stuff Tony D'Angelo decides to pull in game 5 or game 6. Starts throwing his stick, maybe throw some gloves too, takes off his helmet, punches a hole in the glass, just goes full, bro mode. We'll see.
Yeah. I would have been fascinated to see what happened if his stick ended up hitting the puck on Marchand's
That
helmet.
would have been impressive.
I think the refs have discretion to rule that a goal.
Yes. Oh yeah. That's
It's just
illegal.
like they would a penalty shot. But
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
illegal.
that to me is akin to Eduardo Rodriguez throwing his glove on the ground when Yasiel
Yes.
takes him to Mars. So
Yes. That is a great comparison. But anyways, that's the post game show. Game 4. That's Logan Mullen. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Enjoy the rest of the series and make sure to follow us for all your